This past week was quite a busy time in gaming, with both E3 and Summer Game Fest taking place. Over the course of a few days, we got a fairly large number of announcements, reveals, and updates. I've seen a lot of people have been pretty down on the events overall, but I saw at least a few things that I'm interested in. This may not go down as the biggest, most hype-inducing year when it comes to new game announcements, but coming off the back of 2020, I'm not all that surprised. And yeah, I did see things that I am looking forward to, some of which are even planned to release this year. On top of that, there were a few other interesting stories this week that we'll be taking a look at here in this video as well. But I do want to focus on, I guess, the 9 biggest, best looking games that I was most excited about and I'm looking forward to playing here in from E3 2021. But before we jump into any of that, let's get a quick word from today's sponsor. Today's video is sponsored by ExpressVPN. I'm sure many of you watching this video know what a VPN is, but basically speaking, it routes your internet connection through encrypted servers, which has benefits like masking your IP address if you've got privacy concerns. But most interesting to me is that it can make the internet think you're located somewhere else. So any services that have regional locks or region-specific content, like certain Netflix shows or video games, will be available no matter where you live. There's a lot of great-looking Eastern MMOs, for example, that I've basically just been waiting on to launch in the West in order to play. But using a service like ExpressVPN lets me check those out immediately. I think for that reason alone, it's a pretty cool service, but Express also has a bunch of other pretty neat benefits for gaming. Besides bypassing region locks, you can gain access to earlier launch times during staggered worldwide releases or access to cheaper regional pricing. So if you're interested in learning more and checking out ExpressVPN yourself, head to expressvpn.com/force. As a bonus, they're offering 3 free months of the service to anyone who signs up using the link. All right, so let's kick things off and jump into the biggest, most exciting things that I'm looking forward to that came out of this year's E3 and the Summer Game Fest. First up, the creators of Dark Souls and Bloodborne once again are bringing us one of those kind of games, but this time in an open world. Of course, I'm talking about Elden Ring. Now, we first learned about this back at E3 2019, but things went pretty quiet in the subsequent years since then. That was until this year's event, which actually brought us our first gameplay trailer. It's only about 3 minutes long, but I think does give us a pretty good idea of what to expect from the deliberate timing and positioning based action combat the Souls series has made so popular, to the atmospheric environment and setting, the cryptic story, the ability to summon other players, as well as the super creepy enemy designs and oversized bosses. Yeah, this sure does look just like a Souls game, but taken to the next level. Between that super crisp visual fidelity that we saw, those clean looking animations, and just the knowledge that this is going to be a big open world with the addition of mounts, I think this thing looks really slick. I'm super excited to see and learn more about Elden Ring in the coming months here. I am a major Dark Souls fan, and I'm really tickled at the idea of an open world version of that kind of a game, and I feel like we could probably trust them to get this thing right. The trailer also showed us the release date. They are scheduled for January 21st, 2022, so not too far from now. And also, I'm happy to see that the game's coming to both consoles and PC simultaneously. Thank you very much, FromSoft. This week, we also got our first real look at Bethesda's next major RPG, their first new universe in 25 years. That is Starfield. They released a teaser that apparently was using in-game alpha footage, and you know what? It looked pretty good. We got some environmental shots, a look at a spaceship, some close-up of various objects. We saw a character boarding and then stepping into the cockpit of this ship. All of this leading up to the ship's launch, which was also the release date. Cheeky. That said, I'm not counting on this being how the game really looks in action when it releases. You know that we've been down this road plenty of times in the past. Nevertheless, as a trailer goes, this did look pretty good. Now, what are we expecting from the game itself? Well, it's a Bethesda RPG in space, so all of the freedom, the charm, and the jank that Elder Scrolls and Fallout games normally have, they're going to be giving us that on a universal scale. We'll be playing as a member of Constellation, which is this last group of space explorers, and we're going to be traveling across the galaxy, visiting new planets, and experiencing their stories. It's all fairly vague at this point, but regardless, I am interested enough. Like, sure, their last game didn't exactly meet people's expectations at launch, but I have heard that they've turned things around. Like, apparently Fallout 76 has a pretty strong player base right now. They even revealed some new upcoming content that people seem somewhat excited about for that game. So, you know, either way, I can't help but be interested in just seeing what Bethesda does next. Starfield is currently planned for launch on November 11th, 2022. And while we're talking about space RPGs, I do want to briefly mention the Outer Worlds 2 announcement. It was a rather tongue-in-cheek trailer poking fun at the typical reveal trailers. The fact that most of what you see in those trailers never are in the final game or how the game actually really looks. And yeah, that is the case here too. It was pretty much just this cinematic kind of funny reveal that the Outer Worlds 2 is going to be a thing at some point. And I think that's good. You know, as a like smaller scale Fallout style game, the original Outer Worlds was fairly well received, and I'm happy to see it was successful enough that they are going to be making a sequel. Next up, we got the reveal of a new game from Arcane Austin, which is the team behind Prey and Dishonored. Those were both pretty good games. Well, their newest game is called Redfall, and it is an open world co-op action FPS set on an island in Massachusetts. I gotta say, as someone who has spent most of his life in New England, wicked good setting, guy. Wicked good. Park the car. The town is under siege by a legion of vampires and will be choosing from a diverse roster of characters and then grouping up to form the ultimate vampire slaying team. The trailer was purely cinematic, mostly just showcasing the game's theme, character design, and a bit of story. Beyond that, we have absolutely no clue how the game will look or play at this point, and the release date is over a year away, planned for the summer 2022. Mostly, I think that this game is worth mentioning because it's from Arcane Austin. I thought Dishonored was a fantastic game, so I am interested in seeing anything that studio does for that reason alone. But for now, we'll just have to wait and see like what the game actually looks like, how it plays, what it actually is, beyond knowing that it's an open world co-op action FPS where you fight vampires. Next up, let's talk about Back 4 Blood. This is that new Left 4 Dead game in everything but name. It's a 4-player co-op first-person shooter where you fight back hordes of zombies. There are 8 customizable cleaners, a range of lethal weapons, there's competitive multiplayer, a cooperative campaign. They say the game will have extreme replayability with their roguelite card system and a game director that adjusts difficulty based on how you play. So they released several new trailers for the game. One of them was this flashy cinematics mixed with a HUD-less gameplay, while the others actually showcased various aspects of the game's PvP, from the fact that you can play as the zombies, which they call Ridden, and they're gonna have all of the variations that you may expect. There are like these big tanks, bruisers, exploders, and ranged variants. And then the other trailer also gave a general overview of how the 4v4 swarm mode PvP matches will work. And I gotta say, it all looked pretty good. As someone who never spent much time with the original Left 4 Dead, I know it's blasphemy, but I just didn't. I am interested in trying out this modern day take on that kind of game. And I've been hearing generally positive things about what people have seen so far. They also revealed that Back 4 Blood will be releasing this October the 12th. Now, the next 2 games here are just going to be brief mentions. I'll tell you why. So first off, we've got the Breath of the Wild sequel. This looks cool, but I still haven't even played the first Breath of the Wild. Now, I did grow up playing Zelda games with the N64 and the original Nintendo versions of Zelda, the releases. So I'm always interested to see how the franchise moves forward. I just really haven't done much non-PC gaming these past 10 years, and really for no other reason than there's literally too many good games. Like, as it is, I don't have enough time to spend playing all of the PC titles that I'm interested in. So for that reason, I haven't been too motivated to invest in consoles. Like, there's already enough good games that I haven't even gotten around to. But yeah, this thing looks dope. I'm sure I would like it, and it's definitely worth checking out. And the second brief mention is just going to be the Western release of Lost Ark. You guys know me, I love MMOs. We covered this pretty extensively last week, which is why I'm not going to say too much more here. It's that top-down MMO RPG. It's kind of like you took a Diablo ARPG style game and mashed it with an MMO. It looks great. We've heard mostly good things from the Eastern release that happened back in 2018, so I'm happy that they're finally bringing this thing to the West. I can't wait to play it, and hopefully I can avoid the urge to spend too much money on their cash shop. Now, I know generally I focus mostly on like RPG and MMOs on the channel, but sometimes times, I really love me some good old competitive FPS, and that's what these next two games are going to be. First, there is Halo Infinite. Holy crap, this thing is really coming together. I think this looks amazing. I doubt I'm even gonna touch the single player, so I don't care about any of the story stuff or whatever, but I will be all over the multiplayer. They released over 10 minutes of multiplayer gameplay at E3, and everything looks great. It's like they took the classic Halo formula and put on a modern twist, put in some of the best aspects of the various Halo games over the years, and all of this is making me very nostalgic for the time that I spent with this series as a teenager, playing Halo 1, 2, and 3 as I was like a young boy in college. It seems like Infinite is going to be the point where I actually finally come back to Halo after all these years. It certainly doesn't hurt either that day and date this thing's going to be playable on PC. And I don't know what else to say. It's Halo, it's next generation, the multiplayer will be completely free to play, and it is planned to release this holiday season. We also got the official reveal and a few minutes of gameplay for Battlefield 2042. This also looks really great. The game takes place in 2042 and is a modern, futuristic setting, and is going to be the series' biggest scale yet. They're going to be supporting up to 128 players on next-gen consoles and PC. Sorry, last-gen consoles, you guys are getting half the player size, but nevertheless, the game features massive maps, updated modes like Conquest and Breakthrough, along with the all-new Hazard Zone. And really, to me, the best thing about Battlefield games that I've played has just always been the scale and the crazy stuff that can happen in these huge fights. Like, there's so much going on. There's so many people doing anything. People on the ground, people shooting RPGs, people in vehicles. It can be hectic fun. You see the craziest stuff in Battlefield games. It's what I really enjoy, and things are looking pretty good for their next installment in 2042. This one launching in October 22nd, 2021. Now, this isn't an all-encompassing list of everything from E3 and Summer Games Fest. Again, this is a small kind of scope of the things that I think we're probably just like I'm most interested in and I'm most likely to be playing and most excited about this year and next. Honestly, though, if anything, I kind of felt like that those smaller scale AA or indie titles, whatever we want to call them, in many ways, these were kind of the stars of the show. There were some really interesting looking and sounding new games revealed. So much so, in fact, that I'm planning on making an entirely separate video dedicated just to some of those. But yeah, these are the bigger titles, the 9 games that I think are most interesting, I would be most excited about. Obviously, like I mentioned, I'm not going to play the new Zelda game probably, because I'm probably not getting a Nintendo console anytime soon, but it deserves to be on the list. As I grew up with Zelda, it deserves to be on the list. As I mentioned as well earlier, outside of these events, there were a few other bits of interesting noteworthy news I just want to quickly touch on. First, Diablo 2 Resurrected got a release date of September 23rd. There is also going to be an open beta this August where you can try out the remaster for free for yourself. It's going to have 5 of the 7 classes available to play. I am pretty excited for this. If nothing else, I think it's just going to be a fun nostalgia trip for a few days. Sounds good. It's probably the most excited I'm getting about any Blizzard titles in the next year or two. And then Sea of Thieves. Well, you bet you didn't think you were going to hear that, but yeah, they've got a pretty big update coming. It's called A Pirate's Life, and it's bringing the Pirates of the Caribbean into Sea of Thieves. This is going to be free for all players as part of their Season 3 update that's coming on June 22nd, and it's going to add a series of new Pirates-themed quests, locations, characters, and enemies. Sea of Thieves, I think, is a pretty neat game. I know it wasn't like everyone's favorite at launch. I really liked it, though. I played it a lot, more than most people that I personally know, and always keen to go back and check out games. Maybe this is the time for me to revisit Sea of Thieves. I will say, though, you know, I agree that this was not like the most jam-packed, mind-blowing year, especially when it comes to new like AAA announcements. I mean, a good chunk of this list was just games we've already known about in years past. So the big publishers and developers didn't come out in mass blowing our brains off with some exciting new things we've never heard about. But that's kind of plays into what I mentioned, how there were some really interesting looking indie titles and mid-tier games, AA games, and I do want to make a whole video dedicated just to that, because I really think honestly it deserves it. But in terms of the big stuff, the things that like AAA, bigger budgets things that I'm excited about, that is this list. That is what we covered here. And yeah, some really, really cool looking things. Honestly, I wasn't sure how 2021 was going to look in terms of like the later half of the year. I wasn't sure how many new games there were going to be to play, but between this and some of the other games that I've been talking about over these past few months, there are some cool looking things. It seems like just about every month for the rest of the year, there's at least a handful of games that I'm interested in playing every single month. So sounds good to me. This is going to be a pretty exciting fall, actually. More jam-packed than I expect. It's not really jam, you know, whatever. There's games coming out that I'm interested in. That's pretty cool. But here's the list. Thank you guys for checking this out. The 9 games that I'm most excited about from E3 2021. I know 2022 is going to be a crazy year. That much I can say for sure. But there's still some cool stuff here. So there you go. Thank you guys for watching. As always, appreciate your support.